All right. Well, let's get started and jump right in here. Welcome and good morning. Thank you for joining myself, Joe DeLucchi with Cal Insurance, and our partners, the ESM team of Anthony, Abe, and Sinead this morning. So this is the sixth, believe it or not, the sixth panel webinar that Cal and ESM have hosted together. I mean, think back to March when all of this was just coming about and there were so many fears and concerns for a business. What do we do? And now we're here September 1. And COVID's here. COVID's in the workforce in some occasions. And now what do we do? And so for a business owner, an operator, HR, risk management, you look at the situation we have out there right now, and I know that's a fear. We've had a number of clients that have come to us over the last few weeks. You know, an employee has caught COVID. We're not sure if it happened here. We might be at home. So there's still a lot of unknowns, but it's entering the workplace. And now we need employers to be prepared for what to do when COVID enters your workplace. And that's the purpose of today's webinar on how to manage these workers' compensation claims. Okay, Sinead, let's go to the housekeeping. As we know through our presentations, this is a workers' compensation focus. So we are here for employers with employees. Anthony and his team have deep safety and Cal OSHA compliance backgrounds. Anthony consults with our clients on OSHA type issues. I know he's going to get into that. We have a very specific and live example that we're going to see later on today in the slide deck. This is the framework for COVID risk management. ESM has done an outstanding job with the materials. And as we go through this today, there's going to be some polls. There's going to be a survey at the end, but also Sinead has put very specific resources throughout these slides as well. And she's going to also push that content out through the chat button so that you have the links you can go to. But we'll have several reminders through this webinar. And then question and answer. We're going to do the best we can with the cues that come through during the presentation. Historically, we just kind of roll with them and work them right through. If we've not addressed something and you need for us to address it even deeper, we're here for you after this webinar as well. Feel free to send an email or a phone call. Let's go to the presenters and contributors today, Sinead. So I'm Joe DeLucchi. I am the president and CEO of Cal Insurance. We are an insurance advisory team. We structure programs for businesses, for schools, for nonprofits, real estate investment groups, and also successful families across the United States. I'm joined today by our friends, our partners at ESM. Cal and ESM created a strategic partnership about 1.5 years ago, specifically for our clients with workers' compensation. Anthony Poston is the CEO, and he's also the OSHA compliance arm of ESM. Joining Anthony today on the team is Abe Jabhan, and his background is in the work comp claim management world. That's a space he grew up in. He knows how adjusters work these workers' compensation claims. He's an expert in that space, and he and people like Abe within ESM work on our clients' behalves to really talk to the adjusters as to why claims are reserved the way they are, why they're structured the way they are, why they're not closing, why what is happening is happening. And Abe understands that language and able to successfully help our clients out. And Sinead is really our customer success advocate at ESM. She works with a number of our clients too, showing them around ESM Insight and all of the tools and resources that they have at their disposal. So very, very important. Thank you all for being here this morning. Let's go on to our webinar series here. So I had mentioned before, we started out in March with the exposure control plan. And some of you folks on this call today, on this webinar today, have been with us through the first 5 and now on to number 6 right here. So you've been with us from the beginning, or maybe you've seen a replay of the webinars. We do send out the recordings, and hopefully you've taken advantage of the numerous resources that have been prepared, and we're going to go over a few of those as well. But we knew that we had the remote work program, then the claims management, then the executive order, then the return to work, and here we are, what happens with a COVID claim in the workplace. Okay, so let's move forward, Sinead. and today's sections. So we're going to have a return to work update. The California new tiered system, ESM, has put together a beautiful, beautiful spreadsheet and outline for that. Reporting COVID cases. What do you do? Are you supposed to let Cal OSHA know? How quickly are you supposed to let Cal OSHA know? We're going to dive into that. We have some COVID case studies as well and some pending legislation. So really today, you've made the right choice by being here to listen to this. This is on so many employers' minds, and I'm glad you are here to hear this live today. All right, let's move forward to return to work. And with that, Anthony, actually, you know what we'll do is we're going to do the poll first, and then I'm going to have you come in right after the poll. So Sinead, let's get the poll up real quick here. And you can just click yes or no. Are you confident that your COVID-19 exposure control plan is OSHA compliant? Very simple, yes or no. We'll give you 10 seconds. Please jump in there, and we will share the results in about 10 seconds. All right, yes or no. Are you confident that your COVID-19 exposure control plan is OSHA compliant? All right, Sinead, should we close the polling?
Yes, so we'll share the results. It's you know, we have some that are prepared. Let's see, here's the results right here. So about 63% of everybody that joined the poll have their exposure control plan done, and we have about 38% that don't, which is great because you'll learn all about how to get prepared today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so let's move forward to the next slide, Sinead. And here, I'm going to ask Anthony to step in and talk about the tiered system that's been created. Anthony, please.
Great, Joe. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Glad you're on today's webinar. We're really going to speak to the 38% that responded no. And for those of you who responded yes, we're going to put that to the test with a couple of more polls. So first and foremost, what happened on Friday was that Governor Newsom rolled out a new blueprint for a safer economy. And it's a statewide, slow rolling plan because remember, we're going to be in this for a while. So this plan is really to help offset the 58 different county requirements and moving that into 4 different tiers. So it's more of a statewide plan than individual county plans before, which was pretty convoluted to say the least. But here are really the 5 key elements in how this plan was developed. First, we're going to maintain at least 21 days in the current tier. So if you're in a tier and you move to the next tier, you have to maintain that for 21 days before you can move to the next tier. And it's really driven off these mandatory metrics, which is case rates and test positivity. And you can see here on the right side, the county risk level to new cases to positive test columns. Now, as I just mentioned, this is a uniform state framework with these 4 unique categories, which is a lot better than the 58 county individual requirements that we were trying to navigate before. So we have been following this all along from February into March, and now here we are in September, hard to believe, and we've been trying to navigate the complexity of this ever since. So I actually really like this framework. It's a little bit easier to manage. It's definitely more opportunistic as we move to element number 4, where it's a more nuanced way of allowing activity. So instead of just open or close, yes or no, sectors can be partially opened, and then as those rates decrease, they can continually open up additional portions of their business. And then number 5, there's an emergency brake, as they call it, for tightening back up again if they start to see an increase in hospitalizations or an increase of new cases. So Sinead, let's go to the next one here. Now, diving deeper, this is more of a micro view of this whole blueprint. And so you can see here, this is just one snapshot of one of the pages. There's about 6 pages. We have the link down here below. Sinead's going to be posting this for you. On the left side, we have the different sectors or the different industries. And then again, we have the top tiers. We have the tiers on the top row: widespread, substantial, moderate, and minimal. And then under each one of those, based on your sector, there's going to be specific opportunities to open with modifications, as you can see here, or remain closed depending on your sector. So we're going to continue to track this. It's going to be updated every Tuesday by the state. So every Tuesday, be sure to check back in. We're going to actually post this on our Google Sheet that we've put together to track all of the different county requirements. So if you're trying to remember where to go, we're going to send you a link that you can bookmark, and then you can check back in every Tuesday. And I'm sure you're already getting updates anyway from your local county ordinance. So Sinead, let's go to the next one here. I'm going to go through this kind of quickly today because I know many of you are here to talk about the claims management piece, but I really wanted to give you an update as to what's happening within the state. And this literally became effective yesterday. And you can see here are the specific counties that are already in the less than widespread sector. And we've got minimal, moderate, and substantial. And so we're going to continue to track this, and we are hoping that we're going to continue to see some movement from that widespread down into the substantial, moderate, and the minimal stages. So currently there's 39 counties out of the 58 that are still in the widespread sector, but you can see here substantial, moderate, and minimal. We're starting to see some movement in some of these counties. So Joe, San Francisco, we've got the substantial category, which is going to allow us to open up a little bit more with modifications, of course. So continue to track this. We'll send updates frequently. You can definitely check our website for updates as well. We'll be sharing that here in just a second. All right, now let's look at some of the additional toolkits that have been prepared by the CDC, FedOSHA, CalOSHA, and then local county requirements. So we're going to take a look at this macro view. Many of you have been with us during this pandemic journey with all of our webinars. This is one of the new toolkits that came out of the CDC. I've highlighted the two sections here, Restart Readiness Checklist and the Worker Protection Tool. These are two checklists that I encourage you to take a look at and just cross-reference your own exposure control plan versus what the CDC is recommending from getting your business back online, as well as the worker protection tools. So we're going to dive a little bit more deeper into this from the micro standpoint, but just so that you know, there's some pretty amazing resources that have been put together by the CDC. And Sinead, let's go to the next one here. And now this is the California versions of the employer playbook for a safe reopening. And you can see here on the left side, here's the topics and the highlights. And most importantly, the top one, if you have 3 or more lab confirmed cases within 2 weeks, that is considered an outbreak and you have to contact the local health department for guidance. Now, the local health department also has the authority per this playbook to shut operations down. So it's very important that you have your exposure control plan and that you have documentation of the initiatives that you put in place to mitigate these exposures. I can't stress enough the documentation aspect, and we're going to look at a specific case study and we're going to put your documentation to the test here in just a second.
So Anthony, I've got a warehouse and I have 200 employees that work in this warehouse, staggered hours and so forth. If I have 3 confirmed cases within 2 weeks, I need to shut down my 200 employee warehouse?
Well, you don't necessarily have to shut it down. You
Okay.
do need to call the local health department for guidance. And the interesting thing about the 3+ lab confirmed cases is that the ratio is substantially different from 3 versus 200 versus 3 versus 10, right? So that's where I think the local health department, and I haven't seen this happen yet. This was rolled out about a month ago. And so we haven't really seen this fully played out just yet, especially now that we have the new tiered system. But you do need to call the local health department for guidance. And Abe's going to talk about a specific case study, but what we have seen work with other employers in that same position is that when they have a confirmed COVID case, they send the employee to the local public health department, and then they require the local health department to give clearance for that employee to come back to work. So we're leaning on the subject matter experts at the local county public health department to make that decision for us. And Abe's going to talk about how we lean on the carriers to make the decision for us on whether or not the claim is compensable.
Excellent. One other question, because this is a good one too. I see it's from one of our nonprofit clients with a few hundred employees, but they're spread out. They have several different locations. They have something like 14, 15, 16 different locations. These confirmed cases would need to be at the same location, correct? Not.
This is the murky waters that we navigate.
Okay,
When we
because
talk
I think
about
that's a very
regulations.
important question for multiple location employers.
Absolutely, and there isn't clarity on that just yet. So not to say that we won't see it now that we've got this new tiered system, but as we've seen with any regulation or any new initiative, first off, they start with the idea and then they start to filter it down into specific action plans as that starts to roll out. So I assume that we're going to see more changes to this employer playbook as well as this tiered system over the coming months as we implement it.
Well, I think maybe until there's clarity, I think still that 3 confirmed cases, regardless of location, probably we'd still advise people to consult LHD for guidance.
Yeah, I would err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
Put the decision making in the subject matter experts. Now, again, they've got the authority to shut down facilities, but if you can back up the documentation with documentation about your COVID-19 mitigation practices, then you're going to be in a good position, right? And it's really hard for regulators to put together a blanket policy that is perfect for every industry, right? Manufacturing versus landscape, totally different environments. So in any event, we'll continue to monitor this. We'll keep everyone updated. You might have saw that we have a webinar coming up next month. It's going to be preparing for the future and how we're going to live with COVID-19 as a business, into 2021, hopefully not past 2021.
Yes.
Okay, so moving on here. Now, again, the California Department of Public Health has put together their identification preparedness. So along the same thread, do you have a designated workplace infection coordinator? And really what the recommendation is to have your COVID task force team. And the COVID task force team would share responsibilities. 1, from engineering controls, 2, maybe procuring PPE, 3, managing our customers. And if we're especially a delivery company, what their exposure control plan looks like so that we can make sure that we're aligned to what their expectations are. So divide and conquer. Put your task force team together, your safety committee, assign roles and responsibilities based on several aspects of your business and how each one of those aspects rolls back up into your exposure control plan. Sick leave policies, they need to be flexible, need to comply with the FFCRA. Abe's going to touch on that here upcoming. We can't stress enough, if you're sick, stay at home. And we've got Labor Day right around the corner at the end of this week. And I can tell you, talking to a lot of loss control folks at different carriers, they're concerned that there's going to be a spike of COVID cases after this weekend. People are going to get together. Obviously, alcohol breaks down barriers, so the social distancing is going to be challenging. Wearing a mask is imperative. And so we put together a Labor Day safety tool that Sinead's going to share here in just a second. We also want to develop mechanisms for tracking suspected cases and confirmed cases. This is that whole tracking system, and I'll show you an example of an app that we've partnered with that does that. And then obviously identify the contact information for the local health department. So as we talked about the potential outbreak, make sure that you have that contact information. And we've got all of that ready for you. So we're going to share that Google Sheet here in just a second. So now we look at the California Department of Public Health, how to open safely. So we've got CDC, now we've got the California Department of Public Health, and you're going to see some common threads here. And I think these are the most critical pieces that you need to have documentation around. 1, have an exposure control plan, your site-specific plan. Identify job tasks where people might be more at risk. Have control measures to eliminate the exposures. So have disinfecting procedures. Maintain healthy business operations, and you can do that by having your COVID task force who is looking across the organization at specific exposure points and how you're going to mitigate that. Maintain a healthy work environment. Our people are the most important asset of our organization, so maintaining a healthy environment is critical to business success. Provide effective training for workers. That's another key piece, is train employees on not only what the coronavirus or COVID-19 is, but also your exposure control plan. And I'm going to share a stat here in just a second that is really pointing to employers not doing that. And then obviously encourage the workers to participate in the program. Have them give input. Whenever we build safety programs for organizations, we always look to build a participatory program where it's not just top down, but it's also down up. So making sure that those employees participate and contribute to the plan, because that raises the awareness and then keeps everybody aligned to the mission, which is flattening the curve. Let's go to the next one, Sinead. So now we've got Cal OSHA's requirements, and you can see some very common threads here. Have a site-specific plan, have a way of screening your employees for symptoms and making sure if they're sick, they stay home. Control measures from engineering controls, administrative controls, health screenings, disinfecting procedures, physical distancing, and this new one that just came out last month, which is established face covering requirements. That was not one of the core elements of this program until about a month ago. And so now we have to have face covering requirements. And we've got entire exposure control plans for those of you who are Cal customers and Insight customers. We've already got all of these plans developed for you. So I encourage you to reach out to Sinead. She has been building our library and help managing that. She is our librarian. So if you need any support or any documentation to help satisfy all of this, it's going to really enhance and accelerate your overall implementation strategy.
So Anthony, on this slide here, I see, the N95 for the mask on the final piece, establishing face covering, but there hasn't been a ruling to say that N95 must be. Is that correct?
Correct.
Just a face covering, not
Right,
specific N95. Okay.
Yeah, when I put this together, that's the best icon I could find. So,
Sure.
but yes, face covering requirements, correct. Okay, Sinead, let's move us along here. All right, now we've got FedOSHA's opening guidelines, and if you look, you see very common, the common denominators of site-specific plan, isolating people if they're sick, communicating your workplace control plan, implementing disinfection procedures, PPE procedures, and so forth. My favorite one is follow OSHA standards. And Sinead, let's go to the next slide here. We're going to get to that follow OSHA standards element here in an upcoming slide. So that's the macro view where we saw CDC, California Department of Public Health, Cal OSHA, FedOSHA, and now we've got the micro view of the specific sector requirements. And this was just updated July 29th. So each one of these is a link to what you see on the right, that industry guidance. So if you have not seen this, Sinead is going to be posting these. You can click on these links and you can go to your specific industry, and there's a checklist of things that you need to do. And again, this is a great place to get a gut check and cross-reference what the Cal OSHA enforcement body is recommending or requiring. There's a difference. Sometimes there's recommendations versus requirements. And then also against what your exposure control plan is. And do you line up? So this is the compliance aspect. So there's two sides of this. We've got compliance, but then the other side is just the best practices we want to put in place to maintain a healthy workforce. All right, Sinead, let's move on. All right, we've also put together, we've curated these CDC trainings and guidance, and some of these are related to COVID, but a lot of these are related to the personal aspects of our team members. So for those who have tribal members, so you've got multi-family generational households, we are seeing a lot of illnesses come out of those exposures. One of the family members comes home from work, is sick, contaminates the others. Those others go out to their respective jobs and get others sick. And so we're seeing that spread happen more aggressively with that multi-family generational exposure. This other one, this hits home for me too, managing stress. We've got to manage not only the employees, the business, but then also we go home and we have to deal with how we're going to help our kids distance learning. And so we've got the family aspect too. And so there's just a lot of stress that's being built up because of this. So here's some tips on how to reduce that. For those of you that are going back to in-person classes, which our 5-year-old is. She's going to a home kindergarten right now. And so here's a checklist for you to go through to just have that discussion around, what are the exposures? What are my kids going to be doing? Do they understand it? Can they wear masks? Do they understand physical distancing? Do they understand what this virus is? And so it's just a punch list of going through some of those discussion points. And then this other one, children and grief. And children grieve in different ways. And it's not always outward, sometimes it's inward. And so here's some signs and symptoms to look for if your children are grieving. For example, their lack of socialization is a big factor. And so how do they grieve during this whole pandemic, and how can you navigate that as well? And then carpooling. So we've seen several, actually a significant amount of cases coming from carpooling. So if your employees are carpooling, then make sure that you've got the appropriate mitigation practices. We've got DOT standards, we've got Cal OSHA standards, so there's a lot of regulations that we need to comply with for carpooling. So just some curated content that you can use for training your team, not only for the workforce or the work site, but also when they're at home, things to look for. Okay, Sinead, let's move on. We did partner with a company called MyTemply. They are a workforce health screening app. They're out of San Francisco. I really like these guys. They put together a really cost-effective, really almost cheap application where your employees can log in, go through the health screening symptoms check. Once they pass, they get a badge and they get approved to go to work. Now, on the flip side, from the employer's perspective, it has all the employees and it shows all the employees have confirmed that they are not symptomatic and therefore they can go to work. So it's a way of digitizing a lot of this paperwork that we're seeing from employers trying to manage their several employees, whether it's 10 employees, whether it's 100 employees. We have a manufacturing company in the Midwest that we're presenting to that has 2,000 employees and over 100 COVID cases. And so it's not just managing the workforce that's not sick, making sure that they're not symptomatic so they don't get others sick, but it's also what do you do after that employee is confirmed, they have a confirmed COVID case. Then that starts various timelines, and Abe's going to talk about those timelines. So this app can help you manage all of that. And if you have any interest in that, please reach out to us. We can set up a demo for you. Again, a great organization, and they're local to the Bay Area. All right, what you need to know. So I highlighted these two top and bottom bullets. And this is really important, going back to those that said that they don't feel their plan is OSHA compliant. There have been over 30,000 employee complaints to OSHA related to an employer's lack of COVID-19 mitigation strategies. Now, I can tell you, we're going to look at an example here in just a second. I know I work with a lot of employers that have excellent plans. We cross-reference compliance. We make sure that we stack best practices on top of that. But one thing that gets missed is training the employees on what that plan is. And by training, it means you're training them on the specific strategies that you put in place and that you have their signature that they understand it. That is documentation to prove that you have the exposure control plan and that you've trained employees. That bottom bullet point, I follow a lot of OSHA publications. Cal OSHA is actively hiring safety engineers throughout California. And if you'll recall, there's two sides to OSHA, consultation and enforcement. And guess what? They're not hiring consultation people, they're hiring enforcement to support this 30,000 inbound telephone calls. So we're seeing a much more active Cal OSHA. Obviously, they've got the door that's opening to them because they've got all of these complaints coming in daily. This 30,000 was probably about 2 weeks ago, so I'm guessing it's probably closer to 35,000 now. So recall what I talked about at Fed OSHA says, follow OSHA standards. So these 30,000 complaints just open the door for OSHA to come in and look at not only your COVID-19 mitigation practices, but all of your other OSHA policies, from personal protective equipment, hazard communication, fall protection, ergonomics, industrial ergonomics, or administrative ergonomics. So make sure that right now this is a good time to get a gut check on your safety program and make sure you have policies and procedures that comply with the OSHA standards. Because if you go to the next slide, Sinead, here is an example of an alleged COVID lack of mitigation practices. Let me rephrase that. Disgruntled employee called Cal OSHA and alleged that this employer did not have these COVID-19 plans in place. And I've worked with this employer and I know that they do. And what's interesting about this letter is typically when you get a letter from OSHA, we're called 30,000 employee complaints. There's letters going out from Cal OSHA all over the state with regards to this. The thing about Cal OSHA is that if you have a good plan in place and you've got proof and documentation, then they'll move on to those that don't. So with most letters that are not COVID related, you usually have a 15 to 30 day window to respond. With this letter, and what we're seeing more of, is that employers get 5 days to respond. So 5 days goes quickly when you have to organize all of your documentation, your policies, your training, and basically try to discredit these alleged conditions. First one, employer does not communicate trainings and safety meetings to employees in a language they understand. In this case, it was Spanish. Title 8, California Code of Regulations 3203 A3. This is the IIPP standard. So if you don't have an IIPP, critical that you do, because if you look down at all these allegations, you see they all relate back to the Injury and Illness Prevention Program. 3203 A3 is communication. And then as you look down, employers not following their internal COVID-19 policies, that's a pretty broad statement. That goes into A4 and A6, which is identifying workplace hazards, and number 6 is correcting those workplace hazards. Employer does not enforce a 6-foot physical distancing policy at work. Again, identifying workplace hazards, mitigating workplace hazards. Employer has not installed partitions at all the assembly tables. Employer has not implemented portable high-efficiency air cleaners or modifications to increase outside airflow. That's an interesting one. Actually, all of these are. Because if you look, all of these relate back to the IIPP. There are no OSHA standards with mitigating COVID-19 practices. It takes a long time for regulators to pass any type of new standard. It has to go through various levels of approval. So what OSHA is leaning on is the Injury and Illness Prevention Program. And you can see all of these allegations relate back to that.
And this is a really good point, because this client is on top of it, as you mentioned, Anthony. They have the proper protocols, procedures in place, the written IIPP. So it was still alarming for them to get that letter from OSHA. It'd be jolting to any employer to get an OSHA letter, because then if you're not responding or you don't have the right responses in place, then they come to visit, and then there's likely going to be much bigger issues that come out of it. So it's really a good wake-up call, I think, for employers, because no one is immune to this. I mean, we look at this particular employer and we know their best practices across the board. We know they have the infrastructure to put all of this in place, and they have. So there are other employers that are not there yet. They need to get there right now. Right, Anthony?
Absolutely. So again, what we're trying to do in our response is discredit all these allegations. And so I worked with them on putting all of that together. We drafted the letter, we put all the supporting documentation, which is training forms, policies, procedures, communications in English and Spanish. So they have all this. But when you have to try to organize that into a response, it's really important to have a document control system.
Yeah.
Like, where are all of your training docs? Where are all of your policies? Can you synthesize and organize that into a response within 5 days? And that 5 days comes fast.
Yeah.
So now this, if OSHA doesn't like the response, they're going to come out. And when they come out, they're going to be issuing citations and penalties. So our goal is to try to keep them at arm's distance. Inevitably, if they come out, then we've got to prepare for what that OSHA visit is going to look like.
Right.
And we know that there's going to be citations and penalties
Right.
associated with it.
I think this is a good setup to our next poll.
Yep, let's go.
All right, so the next poll we have, please participate, my friends. All right, so yes, my safety program, and select all that apply. All right, so there's 6, and really what we just went over a moment ago. What is within, what applies to your current safety program? So we'll give it another 10 seconds or so for folks to go and click. Maybe it's one item, maybe it's all 6, maybe it's just a few. Please put the votes in right now, and we'll give it another 5 seconds or so. Hopefully you're all able to respond and do this particular poll. And all right, Sinead.
All right, let's end the poll. So let's share the results. So there seems to be quite a bit of compliance, but then there's also quite a few that don't have the supporting documentation and signatures for this. So that leads us to the next
That's
slide.
a great result right there.
Which is,
that is. Really.
Yeah, it definitely is. A lot of times it's not knowing that you need the supporting documentation or having to train your employees. So like Anthony was saying earlier, it's that top-down approach. You want you as management are supposed to make these policies and procedures, but you also have to roll them out and explain them to all of your employees so that they can also roll them out throughout their workday as well. So I'm going to stop sharing the results so you can see on this page itself, the exposure control module, this is what we have created. And there are a lot of Cal clients on here with Insight Access. And like Anthony was also saying, I'm the librarian, that cracks me up. But realistically, there are these documents. There are everything that you need to become compliant within our Insight portal, which is an online platform, all things workers' comp and safety management. Within that platform, we have a compliance library, and we do have a COVID-19 library that has all of these materials. So anything that you would need, including this exposure control plan, which really is a framework. You can take it, put your logo on it, edit anything to make it work for your organization, save it, put it back in the portal, and then you can roll it out and have your employees be notified, sign it, and then you'll document it so that it is your affirmative defense if there is an OSHA audit. This alongside your IIPP, your heat illness prevention plans, those types of things, you need to document so that you have all that supporting information if there is an audit.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on, we also have this, which is great. I know that there is now a new tiered system for all the counties within California, but Alyssa from our team created this great matrix. This is available on our site. After I'm done talking, I'll put all the links on here for you to access so you can check it out. But we've gone through 58 different counties and we are updating this regularly, and it goes through all of the key county information. So local health department info, we have testing facility info, PPE requirements, social distancing requirements, anything you need to know, it's going to be updated here for you. We'll also have a link to the tiered system too, because I'm not sure if that's going to change things, but we still want you to be in the know wherever you're located, and this matrix is going to help you be
So
compliant.
Sinead, this matrix is very powerful. It's an incredible tool. I advise everybody to check it out. Two quick questions that came in while you were speaking, though. On the exposure control modules and the documents, are those translated into Spanish as well? That was one question that was asked.
We do have translations for all of our documents in Spanish. Anything that's going to be more specific for a specific organization, those are not. So we'll give you the framework. Anything that you add to it, you're going to have to get translations, but we can definitely help out with that too. If it's, you know, we're always here to help. We're always creating documents for our clients. So if it's not anything too big, we can definitely help you translate those important documents.
Thank you. And Sinead, the big $1 million question here. One of our clients writes, "Hey, I'm a client. How do I get access to this portal?" And Sinead, this is a softball right to you. How does a calculator get access?
So if you already have Insight Access and you don't know where these documents are, reach out to me. So definitely after the call, you're going to get a survey, but then you'll also see my email. Just ping me. We can hop on a quick call. We can go through your portal. We'll look at all of the documents that you need, and I'll pull them from Insight and show you where they're at. So definitely, if you have Insight Access and you don't know where these materials are, reach out to me and we'll fix that.
And then another question, can you please share the link for the library document?
Yes, absolutely. Well, the library document is only in our Insight portal. So if you are interested in that, you can also reach out to me if you don't have Insight Access. There are quite a few different ways to get it, and we can go over that too. If you just, you know, ping me, call me, email me, always here to help.
Great. Thank you, Sinead.
No problem. So within the portal too, but we will be giving you these documents today. So there are some links here that I'll be putting in the chat after I'm done talking, but we went through quite a few different, you know, events the past few weeks. We had the wildfires from lightnings, we had power outages from like a huge spike in temperatures. So there was a lot going on, and 2020 has tons of surprises. So we will continue to create these documents. Hopefully nothing too catastrophic will be there, but you can see we have the power outage preparation. So this is a great safety tip, something that you can print out, you can show your employees, put it around your organization. It's a great document. It's a one-pager, it's easy to digest, there's actionable tools on there. We have next to it the heat illness prevention document. This goes over all the heat illness symptoms and treatments, and of course we're in the midst of summer, heading into fall, but there's still those high temperatures. So if you have employees that are out there outside, in those elements, this is definitely a great document for you. Labor Day safety. So this is something that's brand new. We have Labor Day coming up this weekend. And like Anthony was saying, you know, we get almost back into that comfortable mode. If alcohol is involved as well, those inhibitions kind of go away, and social distancing protocols also aren't on the forefront of your mind. Same with any other mitigation strategies for COVID-19. You're with family, you're having fun. So this is definitely something that you can share with your employees to go through all of those different ways that they can be safe during this Labor Day.
Sinead, I'll jump in. I just got this in Spanish translated as well. So I'm going to add it to this link. You'll have English on top and Spanish on the bottom. So
perfect.
Tune in for an update to that link.
Yeah, with most of our safety tips, they are in English and Spanish. So definitely reach out to us. Wildfire preparation. So this is a FEMA document that Anthony created, and it goes over how to be prepared for a wildfire. So there was a lot of different fires the past few weeks. There's still, you know, fires going on right now. So definitely making sure that your employees and your organization is prepared for that. This document's going to help you with that. You can print it out, put it around your organization, share it with your employees. You might have employees that are working remote. They still need to have this information. So definitely use these tools to what works best for you.
Sinead, I'll jump back in. Going back to the documentation, we have included attendance forms at the second page of all of these. So when you're providing this training, make sure that you get signatures on that paper, because that is going to be your affirmative defense against the allegations that we just looked at before.
Absolutely. Okay, with that, we are going to turn it over and switch gears on COVID reporting. We have Abe up next, and we do have a poll to start things off. So let me launch that. Let's see. So here's poll number 3. Do you know when to report a COVID-19 workers' compensation claim?
Thanks, everyone. And this particular question, keep in mind that the rules changed yesterday. So going along with the theme of rapidly evolving laws and regulations, it's tough to keep track of unless you're keeping really close attention to the news.
So I'm going to end the polling right now, and it is great that you're here today. So let me share the results. We have 79% that aren't sure. So
maybe I influenced them.
yeah.
All right, well, let's take a look at the stats. I'm going to try and, in the interest of time, I'll try and run through these kind of quick. But so the first one I wanted to show is just a breakdown by industry of the different workers' comp claims that have been coming through. No surprise, healthcare, public sector, retail, manufacturing, and transportation, those are going to account for 3/4 of all the claims right now. Obviously, we'll see changes in that as schools start to open and other businesses start to open as part of the new plan. One other thing I wanted to point out on here too is the claims by month. You can see a significant jump in March. 2,557 claims. That coincides with the shelter in place. It makes sense. It's really when things started to heat up, so to speak. You can also see that they've steadily been increasing. However, in July, I actually have the numbers that aren't listed here, 9,515 claims in the month of July. So a really big jump in claims in that month, as of August 10th too. Let's jump to the next slide. 31,000 claims filed. This is as of August 10th. So it's actually obviously over that at this point, but 31,000 claims, that is quite the jump. If you take a look and take into account July, just a significant increase. And then the 144 deaths. The information that we're looking at the prior slide was July 6th, which is the end of the old executive order. So these claims account for 10.2% of all claims filed. So that means 1 in 10 claims are now COVID claims. This is a great grid. It was part of the employer playbook that Anthony showed in a previous slide. I'm not going to go through all of these one by one, but this is just a minimum criteria to return to work. So it's a great matrix if you know whether or not somebody's tested positive, whether or not they're negative, asymptomatic or symptomatic. Some of the criteria are overlapping. So really a great resource to ensure that you're quarantining or having people off work for the optimal amount of time. At least the minimum criteria, you can add to that based on your company policies. So the executive order, many of you recall we did a webinar on it previously, presumed work-relatedness. Now, there's been a gap period since July 6th when that ended. Now, as of yesterday, we have a new law in place. So the presumption is back on. There's certain criteria for it. We'll probably have another webinar discussing all those criteria, but the bottom line is to make sure you're erring on the side of caution with reporting these claims. If you have an outbreak, for example, that's one of the criteria in the new legislation that was passed. So if they test positive and you have people that have been working within the last 14 days, same as the old executive order, I would err on the side of caution and go ahead and report the claim. That way you're getting protected by the carrier. They have the lawyers, they have the adjusters that have been handling 31,000 plus claims now. So if it isn't work related, they could send out the appropriate denial. Again, there's going to be a presumption now of work relatedness under certain conditions. So make sure you let the experts take a look at it and tell you whether or not this is going to be an accepted or denied claim. And again, as with any industrial injury, if somebody is alleging that they have COVID symptoms and they believe they contracted it at work, let the insurance carrier deal with it. File the claim, make sure you're submitting it to the carrier with a DWC-1 to the employee. And if the claim becomes accepted, make sure you report it on the OSHA 300 logs. Anthony will cover that in a minute. So post-COVID claim actions, I'm not going to go through all of these because we have all the resources already available. You'll have these slides as well. But obviously, just make sure you're implementing your exposure control plan. Notify workers that may have been exposed, keeping names confidential as required by the law. Stay in touch with employees. Really, the point of that is communication. Make sure you're talking to your employees. They may be scared about their health, their livelihood. They're going to expect you to know what to do in this situation, when they can return to work. So it's important to stay informed and we've hammered it home, keep a log of all the COVID-19 cases. COVID-19 cases won't count against your XMOD, which is kind of like your credit score for insurance purposes. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
So Abe, this is actually a good time to interject, and thank you for just reiterating to folks that COVID-19 is not going to count on the experience modification rating report for employers. We did have a question that says, hey, when does this workers' compensation claim, or how does it work when an employee violated a public health order and caught COVID at a non-family party? But the reality of it is, right, the employer still needs to submit this workers' comp claim. And of course, they can, put and talk to the adjuster about what the details and background are, so the adjuster can handle that as appropriate, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a common type of question. Workers' comp is a no-fault system. It doesn't really matter if they're negligent, they're doing something wrong, they're not following your protocols. If they are alleging an industrial injury, regardless if it's COVID or not, make sure you're reporting the claim. The adjuster can make the appropriate denial. You can give them all the background information. With that, let me kick it over to you, Anthony, for the recording and reporting.
Yeah, so, excuse me, thanks Abe, thanks Joe. Recording and reporting, we're going to talk about when do you need to contact Cal OSHA and when do you need to report a COVID case on your OSHA 300 log. And the first two bullet points here, actually the first three, to be recordable, an illness must be work-related and result in one of the following. First, the case is a confirmed case of COVID-19 as defined by the CDC. And number two, the case is work-related as defined by 29 CFR 1904.5. Now, what does that mean? What we're using is the threshold that if the claim is deemed compensable under workers' compensation, you must then record it on your OSHA 300 log. So again, as Abe mentioned, this whole rebuttable presumption is a bit of a challenge because now we're just assuming that every case is COVID related. So with that said, if you do have a confirmed COVID case, put it on your OSHA 300 log. Now, workers' compensation loss runs and OSHA 300 logs are a great way to map up what should be recorded. Now, these other bullets down below are just the basic definitions under the OSHA 300 log of when you need to report it. So if a work-related COVID case meets one of these criteria above, then covered employers in California must record their case on the 300 or equivalent forms. So if you have a confirmed case, record it on your OSHA 300 log. It's not going to impact your XMOD, but it is something that we do need to record and post on the 300 log. Go to the next one here. Let's talk about reporting. Now, this is an interesting one. Now, under reporting, California employers must also report to Cal OSHA any serious illness, injury, or death of a worker that occurred at work in connection with work within 8 hours. This includes COVID-19 illnesses if it meets the definition of serious. So let's take a look at the definition of serious in this next slide. Serious injury or illness means any injury or illness occurring in a place of employment or in connection with any employment that requires inpatient hospitalization. Now that is a critical term because Assembly Bill 1805, which was enacted January 1, 2020, redefined the term serious injury or illness. And basically the bill removed the 24-hour minimum time requirement for qualifying hospitalizations. Now, what's important to understand is what inpatient hospitalization means. If you have an injured employee, they're taken by ambulance to the emergency room. They haven't yet been admitted to the hospital. They're in the emergency room and they're under medical observation. If they are discharged that day, it does not trigger the serious illness or injury definition. It is when they get admitted to the hospital. So think of the emergency room as your buffer, but the second you cross over into the hospital and you're admitted for additional treatment, that is when it triggers the serious injury or illness requirement. And you must contact Cal OSHA to let them know. And this includes COVID-19. So Cal OSHA, because of AB 1805 and 1804, they want to know everything that's happening within an employer's workplace. And now that they've got 30,000 employee complaints, plus they're hiring safety engineers, they are staffing up to manage and mitigate these exposures. Now, they also got a $17.5 million budget increase on the enforcement side come January 1. So they are out in force. So all the more important that you have your safety program, your policies, procedures, and tools in place to mitigate these potential complaints and exposures. We've also put together a safety tip, AB 1804 and 1805, that you can see down there, and Sinead's going to be posting that for you as well. So we're sending you a lot of information, a lot of things to review. Make sure that you review them and then look at your safety program and see what gaps you might have. And then if you need some help shoring those up, we're here to support you.
Great. So let me just chat real quick about serious and willful misconduct. Why are we talking about this as it relates to COVID-19? Well, we've been talking a lot about OSHA and OSHA violations. If you happen to get an OSHA violation, an applicant attorney can use that as prima facie evidence that you have a serious and willful misconduct. So what are the elements? Employer knows of a dangerous condition. Probable consequences of its continuance involve a serious injury or illness to an employee, and you fail to take corrective action. So if you have a violation, obviously you know about it, it could be serious, and you're failing to take corrective action, then you have a case for serious and willful. Obviously they can file it frivolously. It's actually a higher standard than negligence, which is it's confused with a lot. There has to be an element of malice, recklessness, indifference to human safety. But it doesn't mean that they can't file it, and there could be some exposure there. And I kind of combined this slide and the next slide, so you can skip over to the third one here. So what are the consequences? The amount of otherwise recoverable is going to be increased by 1/2. So what does that mean? Total compensation in this example is $45K. If you multiply that by 50%, that's an additional $22,500, and that's not covered by your workers' comp policy. That's paid directly by the employer. So you can see if there's a large claim and you happen to have an SNW, it can be a significant exposure. And we went over this a little bit already, but just stay informed of the current orders. Obviously, not covered by workers' compensation. You want to be able to protect yourself, implementing and enforcing your safety programs and mitigation practices, and really educate and train employees. Make sure that they're abiding by the safety orders so that you can protect yourself, and document. Some of the other litigation exposures, I mean, if you see any of this stuff that isn't covered by workers' compensation, it's something that you may want to speak to a labor attorney about. But we've seen things like failing to provide face coverings, applicant attorneys trying to circumvent the workers' compensation system, families being exposed due to somebody being exposed to COVID-19 at work. That's a separate type of insurance. Some of you may know employment discrimination 132A in workers' compensation. That also has been coming up quite a bit. Wage and hour, wrongful death. There's just been a lot of different types of litigation exposures outside of workers' comp as well that you should be aware of. This just shows, this was actually the end of July. So the complaints are way up from here, but you can see California leads the nation. For some reason, I'm not surprised, 487 complaints, a lot of remote work, leave conflicts, and similar to the previous slide, a lot of other litigation exposures. Joe talked about this as well. COVID-19 claims won't be included in the XMOD. There's also classification issues with payroll that you want to just keep track of anybody that's working from home or they're just doing a different job because of COVID. These are things that you'll sort out along with people not working due to COVID with the audit. Let's do a quick case study here. So this particular case is really to show how convoluted some of these compensability determinations can be, and just really hammer home that if you have an issue where it's gray or you're not sure, just go ahead and report it to the carrier, because it's not going to count against you as far as the XMOD, and also you don't want to try and play detective or lose out on some type of right. So employee number 1, they reported to their employer that a family member received a positive COVID-19 test, may have been exposed, they're able to get tested. Number 2 often rides in the same vehicle as 1, may have been exposed, able to get tested. And 3 also rides in the same vehicle, may have been exposed, asking for 14 days of self-quarantine and wasn't able to be tested. So what does that mean for these three cases? Well, under the FFCRA, Families First Coronavirus Response Act, if an employer falls under this criteria, there's certain criteria to actually be a part of this group. They qualify for up to 80 hours of paid sick leave, to take care of a child or somebody else in their family that may have gotten sick due to COVID-19. And this really applies to all of the prior employees that we just discussed who are even quarantining or waiting to seek a medical diagnosis. So if they're still waiting for their test, they could be off work. And I should mention yesterday too, there is another law that was just passed for certain industries that will cover employers with over 500 employees. So the FFCRA currently covers employers with 500 or fewer. So just real quick for this, you can see the date of injury here, 4/9, that actually falls within the old executive order period. You can see here, without going through each one of these, effectively they witnessed the employee coughing and they contracted the virus. They were tested within 14 days of working. The test came back positive. And on May 11th, they were released to full duty. So what does that look like? You can switch to the next slide. Employee number 2, this claim was accepted. So the employee tested positive within 14 days of working. They use that supplemental sick leave first, and then temporary disability kicks in afterward. As I mentioned, there's the new legislation that just passed. So effectively, the executive order is back on. There's some caveats to that. It actually has to include an outbreak now. So just make sure that you're aware of the definition that we've discussed. But really, all in all, not a bad exposure. I mean, relative to other claims that you'll see, total paid on the claim, $844, no impact on the XMOD. And just the point of this is just talking about employee number 3. I mean, she obviously needs further assistance getting that test. She's going to be off work until she can actually obtain testing. So establishing a relationship with a local on-site testing vendor is a good idea, or just a relationship with a nearby facility so you can get tests completed quickly. Employee 1 and 2, just make sure that you're filing claims. You know, they're alleging work-related injuries, especially when it relates to COVID, because there's a shortened window to investigate. It's not 90 days like a normal claim, it's going to be 30. And again, that executive order is effectively back in effect as of yesterday. So this slide was actually made before yesterday. So they really went to the 11th hour, passing a bunch of legislation. Really the one to focus on is SB 1159. The ones that had a conclusive presumption of work-relatedness, which means like doesn't matter, you cannot prove otherwise, those are off the table now. So the legislative front runner was SB 1159. It was supposed to just cover fire workers, essential workers, healthcare employees, but they really made it broad and covers pretty much all employees that have worked at the employer's direction at your facility. It wouldn't cover people that are working from home.
Right.
With that, I'll just kick it over to you, Sinead.
Thanks, Abe. So we've talked about lots of resources through this presentation, and just looking at time, I don't want to take too much of your time, but this goes over some of our COVID-19 compliance resources that we have within the portal. So the portal is something that we do offer at ESM. If you're interested in learning more, if you wanted to have a demo, definitely reach out to me. I've put my email in the chat. We could go over all of these documents. This just goes over one of our libraries. We have many libraries within the compliance library. There's over 1,000+ tools, best practices, forms, videos, anything that you need to be compliant or learn how to be compliant is within Insight. So within COVID-19, we have the exposure control plan. We have a work from home ergonomic strategy library. So we do have lots of people working from home, even employees that have never worked from home before. So really having policies and procedures in place is pertinent. We also have the return to work strategy, everything that we've gone through today, lots of documents there. And then Abe's been talking about those executive orders. So we are continuing to update this, adding new things to the library so that you are always in the know. So I will kick it over to Joe to close out. Joe?
Yeah, thank you. And Anthony, actually, there was a question about, can we refer facilities that do 24-hour testing? Thoughts on that?
Yes, I'm trying to, can you refer facilities that do 24-hour testing? You know,
This has come up a bunch. I know that.
yeah, there's not, I mean, we've used on-site before, on-site safety
Yep.
and health, their team of paramedics that can come out, but they do antigen testing. It's not actual COVID testing. Now, if you did see Governor Newsom rolled out a new initiative where they're increasing the number of available tests by 150,000 per day across the state. I have yet to see an organization that can come on site to do it, but let me see if I can find some facilities that, especially, let me relook at Newsom's website to see if they do have a link that you can plug in your zip code and find local 24-hour testing. I know that's being updated now, so maybe they've updated it as of today. I'll take a look at it.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it. And, I appreciate everybody joining us today for this very complex and big topic. As you know, ESM and Cal, for our clients, we're here to support you during these very difficult times. And if there's other business owners that would benefit from Cal and ESM taking over the workers' compensation program and having the loss control resources and the COVID resources and the claims handling resources that Cal and ESM provide for our clients, we definitely would favorably love to have those workers' compensation client referrals. So our clients that have workers' comp through Cal, this is a benefit of doing business with us. And so we thank everybody for being on this call, but let others know that this resource is out there and available. So we appreciate it. Thank you to Sinead and Abe and Anthony today. We are going to send out the recording and the slides as well. Please give us a few business days, but as soon as that's ready, we will get it out to everybody as well. Thank you. Take care, and we'll chat later.